Chapter 1. Grace Against Time. Grace stood at the edge of the crumbling cliffs, her heart pounding as the winds howled around her. The sky above was a swirl of dark clouds, and far below, the swirling portal crackled with energy, casting an eerie glow across the barren landscape. She had no idea what lay beyond, but one thing was clear. There was no turning back.
"I never asked for this," she whispered, her voice lost in the wind.
Grace shook her head, her fingers tightening around the small artifact hanging from her neck. The Nexus had chosen her, yes, but she still felt unworthy of the responsibility. She gazed down at the portal again, its shifting light beckoning her forward.
"I'm not ready," she said, her voice cracking with doubt. "I don't know if I'll ever be."
"You are ready," Ariana said firmly. He placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding her. "I've seen you face worse. This is just another challenge. We'll face it together." Together. Grace wanted to believe him, but the weight of her fears still clung to her like a heavy shroud. She looked at Arianis, his steady, unwavering confidence a stark contrast to the storm inside her. "And if we fail?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What happens if we step through that portal and there's nothing we can do?" "Then we'll figure it out, as we always have." His eyes, glowing faintly with celestial light, met hers. "You're not alone in this, Grace. We've all been chosen for a reason, and that reason is standing right in front of us." Grace turned back to the portal, the swirling energy mirroring her own turbulent thoughts. A part of her still screamed to turn back, to flee from the unknown danger waiting on the other side. But something deeper, stronger, urged her forward.
"We go in together," she finally said, her voice gaining strength.
"Always," Arianis nodded, stepping beside her.
"I hope you're right, Arianis," she muttered. And with that, she stepped through the portal into the unknown.
The moment Grace crossed the threshold, everything changed. The light swallowed her, cold and sharp, and for an instant she felt weightless, disconnected from her body, from the world she'd just left behind. Her breath caught in her throat as her surroundings blurred, the chaotic swirl of colors and sounds distorting her senses. She tried to find her footing, but the ground beneath her seemed to vanish. A sudden jolt hit her, and she was pulled down hard. Her vision sharpened, and the world snapped into focus. She landed with a thud, knees hitting the ground, the impact jarring up her spine. The air was thick here, humid, and tinged with a strange metallic taste that clung to her tongue. She staggered to her feet, eyes darting around. The landscape was alien, nothing like the ruined cliffs she left behind. Dark, jagged trees loomed on either side, their twisted branches reaching toward the sky like skeletal hands. In the distance, an eerie glow illuminated a dark horizon, but it wasn't the light of the sun. It pulsed unnatural, rhythmic, as if the very air breathed with it. Ariana stepped through the portal a moment after Grace, his landing much softer, more controlled. The light that always surrounded him flickered as he adjusted to the atmosphere of this new world. He glanced at Grace, checking her over with a quick, practiced gaze before turning his attention to their surroundings. "We're not alone," he said, his voice low. There was no panic in his tone, just a statement of fact. His celestial senses were already on high alert, detecting the subtle vibrations in the air, movements distant but deliberate. Grace nodded, still catching her breath. She had felt it too, a crawling sensation at the back of her neck, like they were being watched. She tightened her grip on the artifact around her neck, feeling the pulse of its energy sync with the strange rhythm of the world around them.
"What is this place?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. There was something about this world that felt wrong, like the air itself was alive, watching, waiting for them to make a mistake.
"I don't know," Ariana said, his eyes scanning the jagged trees and shadowed horizon. His voice was calm, but the set of his jaw told her that even he wasn't as sure as he sounded. "But it's not what we expected. The portal must have sent us off course. This doesn't feel like the Nexus's world." Grace frowned, her heart sinking. Off course? The idea of being lost in a world that wasn't their destination made her stomach twist. She had barely felt prepared for what the Nexus had in store, but now they were in an unknown place with no clear path forward.
We need to move, Grace said, forcing herself to focus. Staying here feels like a mistake. We're exposed.
She took a few steps forward, her boots sinking slightly into the damp ground. A strange mist began to rise around them, clinging to her legs like tendrils. Her instinct screamed at her to run, but she fought against it, forcing herself to stay calm. Arianis followed her, his eyes narrowing as the mist thickened. You're right. We need to find shelter, somewhere we can regroup and figure out our next step. But before they could take another step, a low rumble vibrated through the ground, and the trees began to creak and groan as if they were alive. The mist around them shifted, swirling faster, taking on a darker, more ominous hue. A chilling growl echoed from the shadows, making Grace's blood run cold.
What was that? Grace whispered, her body tensing as the growl grew louder closer.
Her pulse quickened, adrenaline flooding her veins. She reached for the small dagger she kept strapped to her thigh, its familiar weight offering a small comfort. But she knew, deep down, that whatever was out there wasn't something they could fight with simple weapons. Arianis' hand shot up, and the faint light surrounding him intensified, casting the dark forest in an eerie glow. "Stay close to me," he ordered, his voice sharper now, edged with tension. He stepped in front of Grace, his gaze fixed on the shadows. "We're not alone." The growling intensified, and from the mist, shapes began to form. Hulking, twisted figures that moved with unnatural grace. Their eyes glowed faintly, a sickly green that pierced through the darkness, locking onto Grace and Arianis with predatory intent. Grace's heart pounded in her chest as she took a step back, her mind racing. The creatures, whatever they were getting closer, their growls turning into low snarls as they advanced. She could feel the oppressive weight of their gaze on her, like a tangible force pressing down on her shoulders.
We can't fight them, Arianis, she said, her voice shaking despite her efforts to stay calm. There's too many of them.
We won't fight them, Arianis said, his voice cold and steady. He raised his hand and the light around him flared brighter, casting the creatures into sharper focus. We just need to get through them. With a sharp movement, Arianis thrust his hand forward, and the light shot out in a blinding flash, striking the ground in front of the creatures. They recoiled, their snarls turning into angry hisses as the light repelled them. "Run!" Arianis shouted, grabbing Grace's arm. Grace didn't hesitate. She bolted, her legs pumping as she and Arianis sprinted through the mist, the creatures hot on their heels. The ground beneath them trembled with each step, and the air grew thicker, almost choking her as they ran. She could hear the creatures closing in, their guttural growls growing louder, more menacing. But even as she ran, her mind spun with questions. Where had they landed? What were those things? And most importantly, how were they going to survive this? Just as Grace felt her strength starting to fade, a new sound cut through the mist, a deafening roar, unlike anything they'd heard before. The ground trembled violently, and in the distance, something massive moved in the shadows. It was coming closer, fast. Grace's heart skipped a beat as she glanced at Arianis. Her fear mirrored in his eyes. Whatever was coming for them now was bigger, stronger, and far more dangerous than the creatures chasing them.
Hey everyone, if you're enjoying the content, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll always know when the next video drops. There's a lot more exciting stuff coming your way, so stay tuned and join the journey. Thanks for watching and for being a part of Novel Gallery.